Ever since I started making music with my good friend Mac Rose, I've been really getting into trap music. I've been mostly listening to Juice WRLD, Lil Peep, Lil Mosey, and the work they do is just insane. I'm so impressed. So in today's episode, I want to show you what I've found works really well with trap vocals, like the ones I've done with my good friend Mac Rose. We'll talk about things like how we mix the lead vocal, where we can put on different types of EQ, pitch corrector, of course, one of the marquee sounds of trap vocals, where we can put saturator on, some distortion, and then what I find is most important, having multiple takes of the same vocal, of both the lead and then harmonies of the lead, and to finish it off, having doubles at different octaves. So we'll talk all about this in the episode, so I really hope you take something from it. And if you do learn something from this episode, feel free to hit the like, sub, and bell notification button. Really does help the channel out. And if you have any more questions or you'd like to learn anything more about music production, the best place to go is Twitch. I stream over there a couple times a week, so check it out. Links down below. All right, let's get into it. Here are some tips on improving your trap vocals. Okay, trap vocals. To run through these tips, I'm going to use one of my old tracks, Nobody to Blame. That's with Mac Rose. I'll leave links to him down below. Great vocalist. So he's a trap vocalist and I produce mostly pop stuff. So when we come together, I keep dragging him towards pop things. So let's have a quick listen and we'll go from there. Cool. So first let's talk about the lead vocal and then we'll go on to all the extra doubles, harmonies, whisper vocals and all that kind of stuff. But first I want to talk about the lead itself and we'll talk about its vocal chain and what edits and what plugins we can put on it. That will bring it to the next level. Let's jump up to the chorus lead vocal. And so what we can see here, the delay is nice. We can see here I have two compressors. The first one is just taking down loudest transient, so anything that's really loud, bring it down a little bit, and the second compressor is evening everything out. Now of course all vocals depend on your vocalist, but what I find works really well with Mac Rose's vocals, if we go to here we have a small boost, relatively small boost between 2 and 6k. I've just a little notch up there, 3 dB. I just find this brings a lovely presence to his vocal, along with then the breathiness from 8k upwards, and that's 5 dB. I'm sure there's lots of other plugins that you can use to kind of get this presence, but I found EQ with Mac Rose's vocal just worked really well. So we just have a notch up there between 2 to 6 and then a shelf there from 8k upwards, bringing out the air. And then of course you had to take down the sibilants then afterwards with our de-esser just to control a little bit, but it just works so well with his vocal, so I definitely suggest trying that out yourself. Besides that, we have the pitch corrector, which is really important in all trap music. So I'm using the Logic Pro X pitch corrector, which works fantastically. If you have a bit of money, I would suggest using the UAD auto-tune, but that's, you know, a couple of hundred, so only if you have the money behind you. But the Logic Pro X auto-tune is fantastic, the pitch corrector. So all you have to do is just go into pitch correction, and then open it up and you'll get this. Select the key you're in, and then depending on how low you bring the response down, so it's on 62 now. If you bring the response down to 0, it's extremely auto-tuned. You can really hear there. So you can really hear the response. It's the pitch corrector happening so fast, 0 milliseconds. But if we make it 62, which it was there, it's either still getting that auto-tuned sound. So depending on what vocal you want, if you want something that sounds really like, you know, that Travis Scott sound, you want to bring that pitch corrector down to 0 and make it really obvious, and that's a cool sound if you're going for that. And then you can always bring the response up a little bit depending on how much you want that sound to be there. But the great thing about all pitch correctors, they have their own sound and they just add this extra thickness and extra dimension to the vocal, so it's pretty cool. I'd also suggest if you have saturation, depending on some vocalists like Mac Rose, their vocals really harsh and raw and powerful on its own, so sometimes you don't necessarily need saturation because we'll make it just a bit too distorted because he already has that kind of drive naturally in his voice, which is pretty cool. But what would I do with a slightly gentler vocal like my own, say? I'd be putting in saturation. So one of my favorite saturators is the FabFilter Saturn, but don't worry about that. Any saturator, just bringing up the drive just helps give it a little bit more presence, just warms it up a little bit it's kind of like a little bit of distortion, but just it brings great presence and just warmth to the vocal. So that's definitely something worth trying out. As well as that, I have a little Microshift, which is basically just a chorus effect and a stereo widener, and we can hear the difference here. I'll turn it on before and after, off and then on. Cool, so you can hear a big difference there. It's just kind of giving it a bit of presence. So that's a Soundtoys plugin I find works amazingly for all vocals. What I've started doing since then is actually putting that stereo imager and chorus effect on buses, because sometimes it's a bit too phasey. So I started putting it on buses since then. So I'd recommend that, so you can actually control a little bit more and you can EQ it on its own. And so you're just putting it on top of the lead vocal. It's just a little bit more control. So I'd suggest maybe putting it on its own bus. And now that we're talking about buses, reverb, delay, distortion, really important stuff. So yeah, in these buses, I have a long reverb and I have a short reverb. The great thing I've started doing since then, which will work fantastically with all your trap vocals, is actually sidechaining the reverb. So if we go to our compressor and we sidechain that reverb to our lead vocal. So whenever our lead vocal is singing, the reverb is quiet. And then when the vocal stops, the reverb then explodes. And you can hear this fantastically with a lot of Juice WRLD's production, where his voice still has huge clarity and then there's a lot of reverb while it's going on, and then especially it explodes at the end of his sentences. So this is something definitely worth trying out. It works fantastically. The way to do that is find your vocals. The sidechain is coming from the lead vocal. So anytime the lead vocal happens, the reverb is going to be turned down. So let's just have a listen to this. Do you hear that? So then the reverb explodes after the vocal stops in the little breaths in between. Cool. That works so well. And it's a great way of having a really thick, wet track, but doesn't take over the mix, doesn't muddy it, because it only occurs and fills up the space when the vocalist stops singing. So this is sidechain compression. That's something I'd recommend, highly recommend. It just changes things altogether. And you can do the same trick with delays and with pretty much anything you want. What you can also do actually is do the sidechain onto your synths, so that anytime the lead vocal is singing, you bring down the volume of the synths, and then when the vocalist stops singing, it brings up the volume of the synths, and then they can kind of sit out in front a little bit more. So it's a way of taking turns of what's sitting in front, what the listener is hearing. But for today, we're going to stick with vocals. So cool, that's sidechain compression, and really cool with the long reverb in particular. With delays, I like a quick slapback delay, and then I also like a long one, something a bit more rhythmic. So this 8-note delay could be cool. It's working along, is it a quarter note? Oh, it's half note, cool. So let's listen to those two. We'll turn off the reverb and let's see if we can hear these delays. Cool, so you can really hear the half note reverb there. So that's just giving it a bit more rhythmic stuff, especially at the end of the sentences, and it leads on to the next vocal as well. So try and use maybe half note, quarter note delays, depending on what rhythm you're kind of going for. Try them both out and they'll fill up the gaps in between your vocals. In most trap music, we want to fill up these gaps in between the vocals when the vocalist isn't going quickly in between lines. You know, a lot of the time there isn't even space. But when we do have space, delays like this are fantastic just to fill up the gaps. Or you can use Adlibs as well. You can use both Adlibs as well as delays. Now, that's the lead vocal, and that's how we can mix the lead vocal. There's a few ideas on how to mix the lead vocal. But in trap vocals, I think the most important thing is getting many takes. So you have a lead, double the lead, sing the exact same thing, make sure we edit it to match up so that both vocals are singing at the same time. That'll add some thickness. But then my favorite thing to do with trap vocals is sing the exact same thing up an octave and down an octave. Now, sometimes it's not going to be in the range of the vocalist. So what you can do is use plugins like Little Alter Boy to make it go down the octave. So let's see, I probably have a bus here, do I? So if I didn't have a vocalist who could sing an octave lower than what the lead vocal was, I could just have this little alter boy that's taking the pitch and bringing it down an octave. We're doubling it down an octave. Extra thickness, extra presence. It's going to make everything better. Pick and choose. Let's see if we can hear it now. And then when we mix it in, of course, a little bit quieter, it'll just fit. It just adds a little bit more thickness. Try it and see if it works. It's just another idea, another tool that you can take out in certain situations if you just need something extra. Sing things down the octave, sing it up the octave. And we can see here, I've actually sang a double of Mac Rose's lead vocal. The exact same thing, but I've sang it in my, I suppose my voice, which is a little bit gentler. So it's not going to have as much presence as Mac Rose's natural vocal. And I pan one left, one right, taking out some low frequencies, because we can see lows and low mids are going to get muddy so quickly when we double up lots of vocals. So that's the first thing you should really be taken out when you have so many vocals. And that's what we want to do in trap music, really make those vocals thick and stand out in front of all the music. Maybe not the drums, but most things. So listen here, these are my vocals. Cool, so pretty gentle, but it's just doubling the lead and it warms things up. It just thickens everything up. It just makes it a bit more present. Cool, and we're still hearing that reverb exploding. I love that. Cool, and here we have Mac Rose's vocal sang down an octave. Once again, we can see it's taking out some lows. Okay, that's probably a bit too much, but we do want to take out these lows, low mids below 500 so that it doesn't muddy up the track. That'll be the first thing to cut when we have so many vocals, which I'm definitely suggesting you should do in your trap vocal productions. Cool. So we've low octave, double the lead. I would suggest up an octave in places if it fits, if you can sing up the octave. Last thing I want to talk about is harmonies. Harmonies, you know yourself, just the more harmonies and interesting things you can get into a track is just going to make it seem so much more thick and interesting. You're going to add so much to like the harmonic interest of the track, adding to the chords. You can just make, maybe if there's 7 chords, you can just hit that 7 with the vocal as well, make things pop, make it like, ooh, interesting. So in this track we can hear, this is unreal, this was never the deal. I'm so lost and alone. So you can hear there's harmonies there, and what's actually happening, it's kind of in contrary motion, which basically means when the lead vocal goes up, da 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 dum, ba 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 bum, the harmony's going ba 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 ba. So they're going opposite ways and then together, and that's contrary motion, just moving the opposite ways. That's a cool harmony trick you can try. Just adds an extra dimension because it's not like singing thirds or fifths, which can sound quite cheesy very quickly. So definitely give that a try. Okay, so hopefully that helped. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, or if you want to know any more detail, I can run through more examples of this over on Twitch. So links to those down below. All right, hope you're all keeping well. Best luck with the music making. Cheers. Delicious.